Good afternoon, everybody. Well, I guess it's morning for some people like me. Sun is still shining. We are very excited today to present a new style of webinar for the League of Railway Women. But before we get started on this exciting adventure for us, I do want to give you a little bit of a background on the League of Railway Women. My name is Carrie Gonzalez. I am the education chair for the League of Railway Women. So that particular committee is the one that's bringing you all of these great things through our webinar program. The League itself was established as a professional organization in 1997. Our mission is really dedicated to cultivating women in rail, and although we are focused on women in rail, our membership is open actually to anybody that is wanting to, that shares this goal with us. So our programs are really focused on improving that representation, but always looking for opportunities to expand our membership into various walks of life. So I do want to give a quick, let's see if my slideshow will change. There we go. Just a quick update on webinar housekeeping before we head into our presentation. You should have been able to either dial in or use your computer audio system. If you need to dial in, sometimes we have some problems with the VoIP. You can definitely use a telephone number. There should be a telephone number on the panel up in on your right-hand side of your screen. We do keep everybody on mute, although we would love to hear from you. And it might be a little bit distracting when we have over 100 people on a call trying to ask questions. So we do keep you on mute for the entirety of the presentation. Chris has allotted a bit of time at the end of her talk to answer any questions. So as you guys are, as we walk through the presentation, feel free to submit questions in the questions pane. I'll be monitoring those and then directing them back to Chris when we get to that section of the presentation. Last, I do want to talk a little bit about not only the benefits of our membership, but also how you can register to become a member. We offer these programs for free because we think it's important to get the information out there. And we're really aiming to keep these as a free service to our industry, but your support is needed in being able to produce these and get people willing to talk to our membership base. So I did want to just take a moment to show you how you can be a part of our organization. We do have individual memberships that are currently $60 a year. And then we have corporate partnerships, which we've seen an uptick in participation there because there are really a lot of good benefits and a lot of good programs that we're introducing at the corporate level. So if you are interested in joining either as an individual or you want to get a few people together within your organizations to go down the corporate partnership route, please either check out our website at railwaywomen.org or you can contact our membership chair at membership@railwaywomen.org. We make it very easy to contact us. We always like to take a minute to thank our corporate partners. It's always fun to see this slide because it changes very consistently and in a good way. We've seen this slide probably grow from about 5 or 6 when we started about 5 years ago with the introduction of this program to a full deck, and I have a hard time squeezing everybody in now. So thank you all to any of our audience that's part of the corporate membership program. Again, lots of good benefits in terms of being able to access some new features that we're introducing and network opportunities. So with that, I am going to introduce our speaker. I'm so excited to present Chris, who is a New York Times bestselling author. It's been writing about women of the Old West for more than 20 years. She's penned more than 40 published books on the subject and been honored across the board with many, many pieces of recognition for the writing that she's done. One of the interesting things that she's bringing to the table today is talking about specifically women in our industry and how they've contributed to the many things that we have today and who we are. So we are so excited to have Chris with us. She is going to walk you through a storytelling adventure, and we're all going to be on the edge of our seat. So Chris, I'm going to turn this presentation off and turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I hope that I appropriately entertain folks with the tales about these amazing women who did great things in building the railroad. And I'm excited to know that there's an opportunity to become a member, because this little book, Iron Women, the ladies who helped build the railroad, has done so well that we're going to do the publisher's going to be doing another edition with some wonderful additional stories about what women did. I've been working, just a little background about me, I've been writing about the American West for a number of years, or women in the American West for a number of years. Usually when you think about women of the Old West, they fall into two categories. They're either Miss Kitty from Dodge City, or they're Laura Ingalls from Little House on the Prairie. We don't think so much that women did anything else on the American frontier, but I can assure you, after doing this for almost 28 years now, I can tell you women just served in a variety of roles. And I was excited to be able to work on this book about what women did with the American Railroad. And what prompted my desire to want to write about it is I happened onto this picture here that I want to share. And this is a picture of when the Transcontinental Railroad met at Promontory Point on May 10th, 1869. And with maybe a couple of exceptions, there were no pictures of any women taken in any of these shots, and that was on purpose. And they made sure that there were no women in the pictures, except for maybe the wives of the men who were instrumental in funding this venture. But they made sure that women weren't photographed, because they said these women had no hand in laying any of the track or surveying any of the land. And so with that, they decided that women weren't really necessary in this particular field. But nothing could have been further from the truth, because if it hadn't been for women coming in and making the positive changes that they did with the railroad system, I think men would have just been happy to have the seating on the train just be boards strung across a couple of buckets. Women were instrumental in being able to design and make the interior of these vehicles aesthetically pleasing. And the books in the book, I have included women who really influenced the railroad in a variety of ways. Many of them good, but I'll talk about some of the women who didn't do a very good job at influencing it for good in a few moments. But I want to tell you that some of the women that I wrote about in the book were women like Eliza Murphy, who created a device for improving the way bearings on the rail wheel attached to train cars responding to the axles. And that device is called packing. And she designed this in 1870 and holds 11 patents on this particular invention. One of the women that I wrote about in the book that was one of my favorites is a woman by the name of Nancy Wilkerson from Terre Haute, Indiana. She was a rancher's daughter. And in 1881, the Humane Society launched a campaign to create a better cattle car that would be humane, and the prize was $5,000. And Nancy, who, as I said, was a rancher's daughter, was quite familiar with getting cattle from one part of the country to the next, decided that she would help create a better cattle car. And she invented this particular system generally prior to the rails. I mean, of course, the cows were driven by cowboys from one part of the country to the next part of the country, and then you have the influence of the American railroad system, and then the cows were just herded onto a car, and they didn't have any water, they didn't have any feed, and so by the time they reached where they were going to go, where they were supposed to be, they were emaciated and they looked sickly. And that's the reason why the American Humane Society said we've got to come up with some way to make this better. And they had this contest, and now Nancy Wilkerson enters, and she invents this kind of she invents a rack and pinion mechanism where she's devised a sliding partition that separates the livestock from their feed and water. So they could really nose their way into getting some water, nose their way into getting some feed. And by the time they reached where they went, they didn't look like they were too tired to really be sold. So, I mean, I just thought it was interesting that this rancher's daughter from Terre Haute, Indiana, comes up with this particular cattle car, and she wins the contest, wins the $5,000, and goes on to do to work on other inventions for the railroad. So when I do the part 2 of this, I'll do more about what Nancy Wilkerson achieved with the railroad. Just thought that was absolutely fascinating to me, that you have women like that who were focused on how to make things better for the animals. The other lady that I like to write about in the book was a woman by the name of Mary Elizabeth Walton, who developed a system that deflected the emissions coming from the smokestacks on the railroad locomotives. And she was awarded patents for her pollution reducing devices. And this is back in 1879. So even though that was, 1879 was 10 years after the Transcontinental Railroad had met up in Utah. But women were coming out saying, we can't have all this black belching out onto the American frontier. We've got to be able to do something about it. So men, I think, would have been content with just letting it go with that. But women came in and said, you can't let it go with that. We have to make some changes. And then you move into some of the other great areas that women did, because men were generally the first ones hired to be telegraph operators. They believed that women could not multitask, and so their mission was to hire only men to do the telegraph operating. Eventually, they found out that women were better at multitasking than men, and they would test them. And I've got this wonderful picture here of these women running these telegraph machines. And the way that they would test them is they would have 5 or 6 different machines going in the background, and the women would have to hone in or focus in on the one machine that was pertinent for what she needed to hear and to do. And they were able to do that very, very easily. And the other reason why the railroad didn't want women in that line of business is because it was very itinerant. You would be in one location for a little while, and when it was decided that you no longer needed to be there, they would send you someplace else. So you might be in Carson City for 6 months and then move from there to a little town of Verde in Nevada for another 6 or 9 months. So they didn't feel like women were really suited for that kind of work. But I've written in the book about these women who were exceptionally suited for the job. One of the women that I write about in the book talks about working with a cowboy in the early part of the 1900s. She's working with a cowboy. He's also a telegraph operator, but he's not very good at it. I mean, you have to be available all the time, and he wants to keep taking off of work and going into town with his guitar and entertaining some of the folks in the local towns. And that gentleman turns out to be Gene Autry, which I thought was very interesting. How great singing cowboy, does really well in the motion pictures, lousy telegraph operator. But these stories about these women and the people that they encountered really, really amazed me. And one of the other ladies I want to tell you about is a woman by the name of Miriam Leslie. And now Miriam Leslie was married to a gentleman by the name of Frank Leslie. And Frank Leslie owned a series of newspapers called Frank Leslie's Illustrated Newspapers. And they were very popular across the country. And Miriam married into this particular industry and really wanted to make her mark on it. And so in 1877, Miriam pulls together, here's a wonderful picture of Miriam, tiny waist and all. But Miriam decides in 1877 that she is going to pull together 12 artists and singers and songwriters and painters and just novelists to accompany her on a 5-month journey from New York to San Francisco by train. And they're going to stop at every stop that they could make along the way at the different depots. And they were going to write about what they saw. And they were going to, and some of these artists did amazing sketches about what they saw. And then she was going to put all of that in a book. And so she had these amazing rail cars made up for her. Here's a picture of the Pullman dining car. I mean, she had Pullman and Wagner make a lot of different cars, so her and her entourage would be comfortable as they made this 5-month journey from San Francisco back again. So at the end of the journey, equipped with all of this wonderful poetry and these drawings and just the stories about traveling by train, Leslie puts all of that into this amazing book that is called From Gotham to the Golden Gate. And it sells like crazy. She advertises, I mean, she's a great promoter, and she promotes it, of course, in Frank Leslie's Illustrated magazine. And she is the one that is credited for doing more for train travel in the 19th century than any other woman. Which I thought was absolutely amazing that she's able to do this. And this book remained a bestseller. Anybody that was traveling from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast used this book as a way to be able to introduce themselves to train travel and to the American frontier. So that was Miriam Leslie. Miriam is just this interesting character. When her husband, Frank Leslie, dies and she takes over the newspaper, she changes her name from Miriam Leslie to Frank Leslie, so she could make people aware and be on task all the time that no, she's now Frank Leslie. And she took the magazine, and it was always at a deficit forever. And when she took it over, she made sure that her stockholders finally got paid for their investment into the magazine. Another lady that I wrote about in the book turns out to be the one of the very first owners and managers of her own railroad, and that was Sarah Kidder. And she takes over in 1901, and her husband John was in charge of what they call the Nevada County Narrow Gauge Railroad, and it was in Northern California. Some people called it the Never Come, Never Go Railroad. It just kind of made this loop, but it would pick up gold and transport gold from one part of California to another part of California. And until when John dies, Sarah takes over. She's kind of reluctant to do so, and the board of directors are kind of reluctant to let her take that on because a woman has never been in charge of this. She's reluctant to do it because she knows nothing really about the railroad except what she's heard her husband talk about for so many years. And but she's primarily a seamstress. She makes these wonderful clothes for herself and for her daughter, and gives amazing tea parties, and really is not she doesn't know a lot about business, but she's a smart woman. So when John dies, Sarah takes over, and not only does she like Miriam Leslie make sure that her stockholders receive a dividend that they had never received before. Sarah Kidder does the same thing for the people who've invested in the narrow gauge railroad. Not only does she do that, but she expands the rail line. So when she retires, more than almost 12 years later, after she takes over, in those particular years that the narrow gauge were known as the golden years because of Sarah. When she retires, the people that were reluctant to have her on are now begging her to stay on board, but she decides she wants to go on and do other things, and then moves on to San Francisco with her daughter. But it's just an example of the amazing business sense that some of these women had, just from watching their husbands for so many years run the railroad. And she just was just this amazing character who was, as I said, reluctant to do it. And then when she does, she really makes sure that the railroad is solvent. There are some other wonderful ladies that made the railroad incredibly popular, women that you might not have thought about, but they did indeed. And I've got a couple of images I'm going to show you of these women too. But one of those ladies was an amazing actress by the name of Lily Langtry. Now, Lily Langtry got her start as an actress in England, and she was known as a professional beauty. Not only was she an actress, but she would be invited to parties because she was so beautiful, and people would people would come and do pen and ink drawings or ink drawings of her, and then go and sell them for 3 pennies each on the street. She was just beautiful. And she eventually came to the United States. And when she came to the United States and became this very famous actress, she would travel across the United States in a rail car that she had built for her that included, it had a baby grand piano on board. It had a full bedroom, red velvet curtains, gold lame everywhere, gold braids everywhere. I mean, it was a very ornate train. These cars were very ornate that she had built, and it was known as the Lali. And so when the Lali was coming into depots, people could see the train coming from a ways off, and there would be advertisements about Lily Langtry coming into town, and that you want to arrive early to get a shot of get a view of the Lali. One of the important things that was on the Lali that few people had on their trains, I'm going to show you this picture. It was one of the very first working kind of restrooms. And I like this particular picture because it's a picture of a woman, and she's standing up in the bathroom combing her hair. And that's so everybody could see how spacious this room was. So Lily Langtry was quite wealthy, and she could afford having something like this made for her and owning it herself. And she traveled around everywhere with this train car. And I just thought that's really fun that there's this great picture. I mean, of all the pictures you can have of the vehicle, it's of this woman standing up in the bathroom, so you can see it's not a tiny place. You can stand up and comb your hair. And Lily traveled with that vehicle all over. One of the famous places that she ends up is in Langtry, Texas, where she's going to be meeting Judge Roy Bean, who has been a fan of hers forever. And she finally makes it out to Langtry, Texas to meet him. He's passed away before she gets there, but he does leave her this bear, which she's reluctant to put on board because she doesn't want the bear tearing up the interior of the Lali. Fortunately, I guess for Lily Langtry, the bear escapes, breaks free of the rope that it was in, and she doesn't have to worry about getting on board. But what a fascinating character. And again, one of those interesting parts that you wouldn't think would influence rail travel, but it did, because the Lali was written about all the time, and people were hoping to travel in something like the Lali. A lot of times they were disappointed when they got on because they didn't have the space on the other trains that Lily Langtry did. But thank goodness you have women later on, civil engineers like Olive Dennis, who invent these. She comes up with reclining passenger seats and window ventilation, and to allow fresh air into the car. She also comes up with special lighting over the seat so you could read at night. It was quite ornate when Olive got done with it. And she also created a lot of wonderful dinnerware for each one of these trains. And she just was another one of those skilled ladies that had it not been for her, it might not have been as attractive to go by train. She also comes up with a community bathroom on board where you can wash your hands, where you can get something to drink. All of these are the fineries that made rail travel possible. People were reluctant to get on board when you're all shoved into one car with really not adequate seating and not adequate ventilation. But thank goodness for people like Olive Dennis, who changed that around and then increase ticket sales to travel across the country by rail. One of the other ladies that I wrote about was this particular lady, just a wonderful gal. Her name was Dr. Mary Pennington, and she invents the modern day refrigerator boxcar. Prior to her doing that work, there was kind of a question whether or not we were going to be able to be successful in World War I. Because of her invention, we were able to transport meat, fruits, and vegetables from one part of the country to the next part of the country, which help us to supply our troops with the necessary food that they need, and then also our allies as well. So Dr. Mary Pennington was just amazing. There's a great picture of her in the book where she's on top of the refrigerator car testing it out. And she, she too becomes she's somebody that no one really thinks that women can do this kind of thing. And then you're riding on top of the train to make sure that you test out what you've invented and that it works properly. And people were frightened for her and thought that she was just, men thought that she was a crazy person for doing this. But she really was very concentrated on making sure that her invention was successful. And because of her, as I said, we were able to be triumphant in World War I because of the things that she did in helping to provide our troops with produce. And now, as I said, not all the women that I write about in the book influenced rail travel for the good. Some of them had quite the negative impact on it. And one of those women was a woman by the name of Laura Bullion. And Laura Bullion is a member of the Wild Bunch. And the Wild Bunch was made up of Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid and a guy by the name of Ben Kilpatrick, who Laura was romantically involved with. And Ben convinced Laura that she needed to take part in helping him to rob what would be the last train robbed in the country. And it was in 1901. So the same year as Sarah Kidder does this amazing thing by taking over and becoming the first woman president of a railroad, we have Laura Bullion, who helps rob the last train robbed in the United States in 1901. But she not only helps hold the horses for the getaway team to come in, but here's this picture here is a rendition of what they believe was Laura Bullion dressed in black, holding her pistols on the engineer of the train and getting them to make the stop so they could go in and search women's handbags and get whatever else was on board, whatever in the safes and that kind of thing. But Laura gets caught and she has to go to jail, and she is in prison for more than 5 years. And when she gets out, Ben Kilpatrick, her boyfriend and also the person who helped rob the train as well, he's been arrested. He spends more than 10 years in jail, but she waits for him. And when he gets out, he doesn't go straight. He goes right back into robbing banks. And she decides that she's going to separate from him. And she ends up being a seamstress. And she moves to Chicago. And she becomes a seamstress working at a department store. And but never forgets her days helping to rob trains. And I just thought that was absolutely fascinating because, as I said, there are many women that influenced the building of the railroad or railroad travel for good. But then you have Laura Bullion, who influences it for bad because prior to her robbing the train, women's handbags did not have to be searched. But because she kept a gun in her handbag, and that's what she used to help rob the train. Now, at that point on, handbags were searched. There's a lovely lady from the Virginia City, Nevada area, and her name was Julia Boulay. And Julia was a well-known soiled dove, or a lady of the evening. She was a well-known prostitute in the Virginia City, Nevada area. But she also spent a lot of time traveling by rail with the other firemen to help put out fires there in that very wooded area. So they would travel by train from point A to point B, helping to put out fires. Since I live in this particular area of the country right now that is on fire, that particular form of transportation to be able to put out these fires was very important. And Julia was, even though she was a prostitute, a soiled dove, someone that really was looked down upon, because she came to the aid of the fire department and helped ride the rails to be able to put out these fires. She is celebrated in Virginia City, and she has a rail car named after her. So she goes from being a woman of ill repute to someone that's very well respected. I love the hat there. I mean, it was and I think that she did go out in these garments too to help fight fires. But I love the hat sitting on the little banister in the back there. That was hers as well. I don't know whether or not she wore that. She could have, but as I said, these are examples of women that you wouldn't think influenced the railroad, but they did. And if you go to Virginia City right now, you see at the depot there, you see the car that's still there. It's been restored. That's still there. That was named after Julia. One of the other gentlemen who, it's a gentleman, but it had a whole lot of women behind him helping to make this work. One of the other people that I write about in the book is a guy by the name of Fred Harvey, who comes up with the Harvey houses. And the Harvey houses, generally when a train stopped at any depot, there wasn't any place to really get anything to eat. You might get off the train and run to get something to eat and come back on if you made it. A lot of times people didn't make it back to the train. You'd have to find a place to eat pretty far away from the depot. And so oftentimes they didn't make it. So Fred Harvey decided to partner with the Santa Fe Railroad to be able to come up with a number of restaurants across the country, and they were known as the Harvey houses. And here's a great picture of some of the women that were working at the Harvey House. As you can see, they all had a particular uniform, black dress, white aprons, very well. Everything was pressed, hair done in such a way. There was a definite regiment to how you had to dress and how you had to conduct yourself. You weren't supposed to be involved romantically with anybody that you served at any of the restaurants. And these women would sign contracts to work at the Harvey houses along the rail lines. And their contracts would go anywhere from 6 months to 9 months. And a lot of these women that first signed on, they were going to get paid a substantial amount of money for what they did, and they wanted to go to school. And so a lot of these women would sign contracts to work for the Harvey houses because they wanted money to go on to college. And the Harvey houses and the Harvey girls made traveling by rail attractive. People were curious about what they would see, particularly the men. When they would go from one part of the country to the next, there was some consistency because they knew when they would get to a Harvey house, they would meet these women who were pristinely kept. These women were not allowed to serve any alcohol. So when you came into a Harvey house, you were served milk, iced tea, lemonade, or water. Those are the options. And so they were very, very prompt with them bringing the meals out. And they weren't flirtatious. They had a code of conduct that they had to adhere to as well. If they didn't, they would be fired and they'd have to go back home. But just in writing about these amazing women, and of course there was a movie made about that years later with Judy Garland about her days, about the Harvey houses. But these women were really strong, dedicated women who I thought it was absolutely fascinating how many of them wanted the money to go to school. They would have no other opportunity to go to school had it not been for that. So I was amazed at the number of women who wanted to sign on, and as I said, the costumes that you had to wear, or the uniform that you had to wear. Everything had to be pressed. The big blouses with the mutton leg sleeves. I mean, they were just very dedicated to what they did. The other thing that made the Harvey houses attractive was Fred Harvey hires this amazing architect, one of the very first architects in the West. He hires this amazing woman who's a former artist, and her name is Mary Coulter. It's a wonderful picture of Mary Coulter. And Mary Coulter is, she was an artist. She was trained in the Philadelphia area, and she gets hired by Fred Harvey to design many of the hotels along the rail lines, many of the Harvey houses along the rail lines, and many of the depots. So when people would travel by rail and they would get off, they would have something to see that would entice them to go to these various areas. And she designed many of the depots and hotels in the southwest portion of the country. This is one of them. This is in the Santa Fe area. And you could stop at the depot and you could go in here and get something to eat. But she really was influenced by the Native Americans in the southwest portion of the country, and really designed all of her places to look kind of uniform. And you know, she's so talented. I mean, she not only did this particular look in the southwest region of the country, but she also designed the Union Station in Kansas City. And she used these amazing marble pillars and marble countertops, and gold accents everywhere. So, I mean, she could work in, her talent wasn't really regulated to one particular style. She did amazing work in a variety of depots across the country. As I said, the one in Kansas City is quite unique. And Mary Coulter also is the one that's responsible for designing a lot of the unique structures that you see at the Grand Canyon. The Santa Fe Railroad was really wanting people to travel to the Southwest, and particularly to the Grand Canyon. And so they hired her to do some work at the Grand Canyon by creating, there's quite a few structures there. They are lookout areas, and she designed them so they would all look like that they just sprung out of the rocks. There's a building there called the Hopi House, where you could go in and you could get off the train and you could go shopping and you could step in there and buy items that were indicative of the southwestern Indian tribes. And she just was smart about how she created these things, and Harvey was smart to hire her. And later on, after World War I, when it seemed as though train travel had slowed, Harvey's sons and the descendants and the other people that took over the company decided that they would come up with something called the Harvey courier cars. And the trains would take their passengers to different parts of the Southwest, and they would get off the train, and then there would be these other Harvey house type women, not dressed the same as the women who were waiting the tables, but they were dressed really more in a Native American type of uniform. And they would load their passengers into cars, and then they would take their passengers to a variety of different areas in the Southwest by car. And you would have a day's travel by car to see these amazing sites that you couldn't get to by train. And then they would take them back to the train, and then you get in the train, and then you travel further than that. But every place that you could go, you could meet a Harvey courier crew, and they would give you some tours into the great places in the Southwest that you would miss by being on a train. But you could only get there, only get to these women who were going to take you there by train. So it just was an amazing, thought-provoking way of being able to increase train travel and have these women intimately involved in being able to develop what was going on the rails. Now, there was another amazing artist. Her name too was Mary, and she helped come up with these amazing Western murals and all of the Santa Fe cars. And at that point, some of these cars had the open air feel where you could, I mean, it was covered, but you could see up to the sky. And so, you know, people wanted to travel by rail because of that particular invention. But this other artist I was telling you about, Mary, would come in and do these amazing murals about traveling west. So when people weren't looking at the sky and they were just sitting in the lounge areas of the train, they really took in these amazing murals that Mary and some of these other artists that were hired by the railroad to be able to entertain the people who were traveling. So they never lost sight of the fact that they were traveling by train to get to these amazing locations in the Southwest. So you would have you would have these incredible murals of the San Francisco area. So when people were traveling, they could be going from the dining car or wherever, but they never forgot where they were going. And they were always encouraged about where they were going and the sights that they were going to see. As I said, these women were so instrumental in making traveling by train popular. And so they span such an area of their influence. I mean, these women were inventors. One of the other ladies that I write about is a woman who helped invent, not helped, she did invent the railroad crossing guards. She has about 18 patents that she holds on that particular invention. It was a woman that did that. And so you have these women that were amazing inventors, and then you go from that to these women like Miriam Leslie, who helps improve rail travel, bring ticket sales to get people going west, getting on the train. And then you have people like, as I said, Laura Bullion, who's a bad lady who robs the train and changes train travel for that, as you know, not in a positive way. And then you have, I think I mentioned, maybe I didn't, but the first Miss E.F. Sawyer was the first female telegraph operator, and she becomes the first telegraph operator in 1872. And one of the very first messages that she sends is about who was going to be running for president, and that's one of the very first messages that she sends and delivers to all the people who are riding on the rails. So these women just had a hand in so many different ways of being able to increase rail travel, and it was a pleasure to be able to work on this book. And I'm absolutely amazed at how many people turned out to be interested in this. When you sit down to write a book, you hope, because it's something that you're interested in, that enthusiasm will be shared by other people, but you never really know. So I am pleased to say that this little book, let me show you a cover of the book so I don't miss that. I can find, oh, here it is. So I don't miss that. This is the cover of the book. It's called Iron Women, the Ladies Who Helped Build the Railroad. So I'm pleased to say that this little book that came out in February, it turns out to be a really wonderful seller. And I'm so pleased to know that people are interested in what women did for the American Railroad, and how without them it wouldn't be the industry that it is. So I'm proud to have been able to write the book. Proud again to be able to talk to you women today who are a part of the League of Railroad Women, and I hope, I know we are going to be having a way that you can answer some questions after this talk to be able to win a copy of the book yourself. And I hope too, if you've enjoyed this talk, if you've enjoyed knowing about what these women did, that you'll drop me a line too and let me know, because that always helps me when I go back to my publisher to say, yeah, not only are just the average reader interested in this, but also women who have a real part in the railway are interested in this. And I don't know whether my email address is going to be available. It might be in a little bit, but I hope that you've enjoyed this talk, and I wondered if anybody might have any questions at this point, if we open it up to questions now.
And actually, Chris, I think this would be a great, that was a great seg into actually being able to give out some free books. League of Railway Women has purchased quite a few books, and we are going to give people the opportunity to be able to win those. So I think what we'll do right now actually is go through a set of questions. It's a little bit of a quiz, I suppose, on items that were addressed during the talk today. And if you have the answer and want to win the book, go ahead and submit your answer via the questions pane. The first question that we have is the Gibbon double girder lap joint track was created by whom and where was she from? So if you have that answer, I would suggest that you throw it up into the questions pane, and I'll be giving a couple of free versions of the book away. While they're trying to figure that one out, Chris, I am actually going to ask you a couple of questions.
Okay.
I know that you may have some new material that you're working on. I remember in our conversation yesterday. Can you give us a little bit of insight on your next project and what the focus of that's going to be?
Well, yes, I came into possession, and I hope this is what you're talking about, Carrie. I hope I came into possession of Elizabeth Custer, her things a few years ago, her personal items, and I have written a book called The Widowed Ones, Beyond the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And it's the story of the widows, the officers' wives who were left widows, and the amazing friendship that they had, and how they maintained their friendship. Elizabeth Custer dies in 1933. She's the last of the widows to die, but their friendship got them through so much of the heartache. And they could commiserate with one another and understand what the other one was going through. And interesting enough, one of the ladies in the book actually dies getting on a train. So maybe that's my tie-in to train travel, and it's not in a positive way, but accidents happen, and accidents happened with her. So, but I just thought, it's an interesting book, and it will feature things that no one has seen before that belong to Elizabeth Custer. These amazing letters between her and her friends, and so I hope people will like that book too. I try to always gather material that no one has seen before in every book that I do.
Well, and that's actually one of the questions that we have here in regard to, there are a lot of names that we heard today that we probably have never heard of before. And I know that there's some historical and now movie and TV representations of different things that happened in the construction and introduction of the rail in North America, at least. Do you feel like there's going to be some more focus on some of these characters that played some pretty big contributing roles to the advancement of the industry in the future as you look at, TV series and what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I know that there was a series not long ago called Hell on Wheels, and that dealt with, of course, the towns that sprang up along the rail line, and that was primarily a male cast. But one of the things, I'm also the president of Western Writers of America, and we do a program called Packing the West, where we go into schools with a trunk of replicas of historical artifacts, and we share with the students different aspects of history that they wouldn't know. I am going to be doing one on the women of the railway. And in addition to that, we also have done a number of short documentaries for the kids. Because of COVID, I couldn't get into the schools. I was doing a lot of my presentations outside. So we've done a lot of short documentaries. We've done 8 so far. And we hope to do another. One of my things that I want to focus on is doing one of the documentary series on Dr. Mary Pennington. I just think the idea that this woman invents the modern day refrigerator boxcar and what she did with her life really needs to be something that kids in school know all about.
Awesome. It's a great perspective, and I think we all understand the pains of trying to figure out educating during these challenging times. All
Right,
right,
right.
so I have a winner for the book, the first, at least the first one. We got the correct answer from Jasmine Manley. Is that, I hope I pronounced your name right, and you can't correct me. I know you're on mute. I will send you a email that you can get me your mailing address, Jasmine. I'll respond in the questions pane directly to you. So keep an eye out for that and email us, and we'll make sure we get that book out to you. Another question was actually, where can they purchase the book? Chris, I'm not sure if you have different opportunities for purchasing the book.
Well, it's of course available at so many of the bookstores across the country, but always you can purchase it from the National Book Network, which is nbn.com, or you can go to my website. You can order it through my website. I always appreciate it when somebody orders it either from Barnes & Noble or from Amazon, because when you order it from those two venues, then you can go on and leave a comment that will let people know how important this particular subject matter is. And you can't do that if I give you a book, or if you win a book today, you can't go on Amazon and do a review. You have to purchase it on Amazon. So, but if you purchase on Amazon, you don't have to pay any shipping. So I would suggest go there. And my website is chrisenss.com. And you can always email me for questions too at gvcenss@aol.com.
Perfect. I think the second question for a book, another option for our next winner of a free book for courtesy of League of Railway Women, is who developed a method to deflect factory smokestack emissions using water tanks? So first person to answer that one gets another free version of the book. We'll also be sending out these questions via the GoToWebinar platform after. Oh, and we got another winner already. That one was a quick one. Joanne Roberts, you are the winner of this one. I will send you in the chat window ways to send me your mailing address. Chris, I think the other question that I think that, I can see in your background there that you kind of have a love for the Old West, and I know that you do a lot of activities outside of that. So was this something that was an inspiration since you were a little girl, or where did you find the inspiration to really, start in the Old West and focus areas that were specifically to the women's contributions in rail?
Well, I was working at a radio station doing history moments, and one of the history moments that I wrote about, and I live in the gold country of Northern California between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe, and I was doing a history moment about a wagon train party, and it was the Bidwell Bartleson wagon train party, and it was made up of more than 80 men and only one woman, and her name was Mrs. Benjamin Kelsey, and she made the journey, the 4 to 5 month journey, on foot with no shoes, carrying a 1-year-old baby on her hip. And when I did the story about that, I was hooked. I wanted to write about what she did and how amazing that was. And then from writing about that, just women did so many great things. It's hard to, I have written about the first female Pinkerton detective agents in the West. Women were these amazing agents. They were also lawyers. I had a book come out last year about the suffrage movement, about how that was a movement that was started in the East but realized in the West because of these women who dared to go across the West as they were. And by the way, just speaking of train travel and how important it is, the 19th Amendment, which was the one that gave women the right to vote, was written on a train. So train travel really has factored in many ways about the history of the American West.
Wonderful. Um, we got a quick question to actually have you repeat your email address if you can do that, and then I will
Sure.
ask the question that we have.
It's my email address is gvcenss at AOL.com. As I said, certainly if you've enjoyed this talk, if you've enjoyed the book, please drop me a line. It's important that I have that because I have to share that with my publishing house and other publishing houses who need to know that people are interested in railroad travel and what women did. And it just goes a long way of being able to make a case for that. So it's gvcenss at AOL.com.
All right. I am going to ask the last question for the free books, and then I have one more question to you while we let people answer. So the question for the free book is, what famous actress helped increase train travel across the United States during her tour of the country in the late 1800s? So as y'all are fighting for one of those free books for this one, I'm going to ask the last question that I have, and it's an interesting one, and I didn't even think about it until we got there. So question is, why do you know, and you may not know, you may look, scratch your head and say, I have no idea. You always see in the cartoons and different movies where the damsel in distress is always tied to the rails in like silent film. Have you ever run across like the history of that and why that happened?
I haven't. I have not. I mean, that's a great question. I certainly have not. I mean, I just think it was just incredibly dramatic to be able to do that. And, a lot of, there were a lot of accidents that women had because of their long dresses and their bustles next to a railroad train. So maybe it came from that, but I don't know, other than it just gives it a little bit more drama. I wish I knew. That was a great question.
That's what I said as soon as I saw it. It's like, yeah, interesting.
You know,
Okay.
That's such a great question. I'll probably start the introduction for my next book about women of the railway with that same kind of scenario.
Perfect. Well, I am going to respond. We got about 3 or 4 simultaneous victories on Lily Langtree. So I am going to respond to those. But I will let you just maybe give just a parting goodbye or anything else that you want to talk about before we end the webinar, Chris.
Well, and thank you very much for letting me talk about my next book. That book that I told you about with Elizabeth Custer entitled The Widowed Ones, that comes out in June of next year. But I just had another book come out at the beginning of this month entitled The Lady and the Mountain Man. And that too is a true story, and it's about Isabella Bird, who was a lady who had really terrible poor health, and she was mostly flat on her back. And when she was in her 40s, her doctor said the only way to get better is if you take a trip abroad. She was raised in England, and she does come to the United States, and she wants to climb Long's Peak. And she has such bad health, and her spine is in such bad condition that she travels with this cage around her neck to support her head. And when she gets to the Rocky Mountains, no one will take her because she's a single Victorian woman. And she's also sickly with this cage around her neck. But a bad guy by the name of Jim Nugent takes her up the mountain. He's a bad guy himself, as I said, and they fall in love. And it's a true story. And it's called The Lady and the Mountain Man. So drop me a line. There's a contest to win a free copy of that too. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. Chris, it's been spectacular to have you on and a different look at LRW webinars, but wonderful nonetheless. So thank you everybody, and we look forward to talking with you again on our next webinar.
Thank you so much for the chance, and thank you all to the ones who are listening. I appreciate it.
Thanks everybody. Goodbye.